Radio, the voice of vaping. In each show, we share the latest about regulations and things you need to know, plus upcoming conferences and fests, along with interviews with the movers and shakers in this fabulous vape space. Are you looking to get into this ever-expanding marketplace? Do you want to master this industry? Listen up as Norm Bauer, the Vape Mentor, shares it all. And here's your host, Norm Bauer.
Hey, everybody. Welcome back to Section 2 of Vape News Radio, the voice of vaping. And again, this is show number 4, and I can't wait till I do show number 400, which is going to be not all that far in the future if the way time keeps going the way it is. But, you know, again, this is all about you, folks. This is all about empowering you, edifying you, educating you on all the different goings-on in the vaping industry. So we're doing something that's very unique today. For those of you who have listened in the past, you know that I always go out and I interview a lot of what I call movers and shakers and people of significance. And, you know, because I've been to several events and workshops and conferences over the last couple of months, I just did it there on site. So I just whip out my nice little Galaxy phone and I'd interview them there, and then we'd bring it in and we'd drop the file down. But, you know, sometimes the conversation is not quite as authentic as I would like it to be. And as an old radio guy who's done lots and lots and lots of interviews with people in studio, I love having someone I can actually look at in the eye. And it just creates a much more candid conversation. And so today we have David Collins, who is the founder and president of California Vaping Company. They're located in San Diego. Just a little bit about them is the company is going to be celebrating its 1-year anniversary in July, so happy anniversary in advance. And David, like a lot of people who I can totally relate to, is as a serial entrepreneur. And he's going to share just a little bit about how he got into the vape manufacturing business. But primarily we want to talk about some of the things that he's experienced as a practicing employer in regards to the challenges of working with employees that smoke. David, welcome to the show.
Good afternoon, and thank you.
Of course. So first off, tell us a little bit about California Vaping Company in regards to what it is you do.
So California Vaping Company is a e-liquid manufacturer. Excuse me. And we strictly wholesale our e-liquid to retail stores throughout the country. And our biggest premises is when we looked at this, we understood that people that were vaping were looking to become healthier, and that ultimately they would look to, you know, where's your juice made is what we think is, you know, a really practical question. And so the first thing we did is we put together a medical lab. We spent $160,000 on putting together the cleanest, most automated system you could do or put together, knowing that regulations would come down. But more importantly, for us ethically, was the concern that there was no dust, there's no dirt, that this liquid is the purest, cleanest e-liquid available. And we, most of our flavors, whenever possible, are all created with organics. Our cinnamon flavor, we use organic cinnamons. So I think that's really the crux. My son and I run the business. It's an incredible industry. And I love the opportunity to help to educate the world on really what I saw initially, and that is I own a marketing company called Real Marketing out of San Diego with 40 employees. 8 of them smoked. And I think to address that issue, if you're a smoker, let me back up here just a little bit. I was a smoker for 15 years, smoked a pack and a half a day, and at 30 I quit. And I spent the next 20 years running 42 marathons and doing an Ironman. And I was probably the biggest anti-smoker you would ever run across. And then I dated somebody who smoked, picked up a cigarette, and the story is history, as they say.
All right, so I'm going to jump in here for a second. So basically, you smoked in your youth, and then you didn't smoke for like 20 years, and then you picked up a cigarette. So is it because the tobacco can just be so satisfying for someone who hasn't had it for a while, or do you think that that what you ran into is something that happens a lot in the marketplace? And I don't want to spend too much time on the physical or physiological sense of this, but, you know, as someone who is very physically fit and who found himself sucked back into the tobacco world, that must have just disappointed you.
I was mortified. I was really, I was really embarrassed. And I was a closet smoker. I mean, people knew me as being incredibly healthy. And I can't tell you, the humility was just massive. And so, when I got introduced to the vaping world, it was such a relief.
All right. So as an employer, you've got 40 employees?
Correct.
And so out of those 40 employees, how many of those at one time at its peak were tobacco smokers?
8.
Okay, so 20% of your workforce was smoking, and would you say that that's fairly a common statistic across the board?
Yeah, I think it's 18.9% of the population smoke, so it's pretty common.
And if we had this conversation 20 years ago, it probably would have been maybe closer to 30 or even higher than that.
Yeah, I think more like 39% in its peak.
Wow. Yeah. So obviously the tobacco companies, ring, are seeing the loss of tobacco sales, which is, of course, why they're getting into the e-cig and vaping market, which we're not going to get off track on that because we've already talked about that in the past and we will in the future. So 20% of your employees are smokers. First off, they can't smoke inside your building because no city in California will allow you to do that. So they take their smoke breaks, which obviously disrupts their flow, yeah?
Well, it disrupts their flow, and so every 2.5 hours they get a 15-minute break.
Is that by law, by chance?
It's actually, we do that, but by law it's 10 minutes every 4 hours.
Oh, wow.
But if you're a smoker, you go into withdrawal after 20 minutes. So I've got creative people in a marketing company that have had a cigarette, and then they can't have another one for 2 hours.
And they're jonesing there for a cigarette.
Oh, they're jonesing. How's their creativity? What's their productivity? What's their focus like? What's it doing to my medical insurance? I mean, the questions just go on and on and on.
And by the way, for those of you young kids who don't know what jonesing means, ask your parents.
Well done, Norm. Well done.
That really ages us. But David's a boomer as well, so we speak 70s speak, you know.
They could have thought I was 20, Norm. They blew my cover.
No, dude, you didn't start smoking when you were an infant, but nice try.
Thanks.
All right, so basically you have to give these people a break very infrequently, and so obviously it disrupts not only their time, but certainly their creativity, because we know that when people have an addictive habit, and folks, that's what this is, you just don't think as clearly. And so how did you actually try to get them to quit?
So my son came home with one of the vaping devices and said he hadn't smoked in 3 months. And I said, let me see that. Let me try it. And I did. And 3 weeks later, I wasn't smoking. And then I went on just a gangbuster effort to learn everything I could possibly learn about the vaping industry. And then virtually, I brought it into the company at our expense.
This is the marketing company before you ever opened the vaping thing.
Before I ever opened, we were in full investigation of the vaping industry. I had visited hundreds of stores. And so I brought it into the marketing company, and literally we provide them with all of their juices, their atomizers. If they want a pen, we give it to them at cost. And to this day, I have one smoker left.
Wow, one holdout.
One
stubborn bastard who doesn't want to give it up.
Bitch.
What age demographic is he?
He's another boomer.
Damn those stubborn boomers, man. They're hard to break.
Hard-headed we are.
All right. So I'm guessing that that a lot of your people are obviously millennials and Gen X's, because right now the way social media and marketing is, it's geared towards that marketplace. So do you allow them to vape inside?
We absolutely do. We noticed two things. One is obviously they weren't jonesing for, to get off or watching the clock for a break. But really much more significantly is we pay our designers by productivity. And those smokers that quit, their productivity went up almost 18%.
Wow.
So they quit smoking, reduced the cost of smoking, increased their health, and they get paid more.
All right. So as we talked about in Section 1, for those legislators, those politicians out there, listen to this. Basically, by allowing people to vape inside, you are creating a more productive business. You're creating a more productive employee. You're creating a healthier workforce. You're creating less intrusion by having people go outside. So please, let's start looking at this with a little bit of a rational eye and don't just have this knee-jerk reaction. So as it stands right now, do your people who used to smoke and are now vaping, do they just think you are like the coolest thing in the world?
Well, we try and keep that environment irrespective of their smoking habits or not. But I think the two things that really, really encourage me, they definitely love the environment. We have a killer environment in our company. Our company is about culture, and we were concerned about the other employees and how they would feel about this. And to date, almost a year later, we have never had a single complaint from a non-smoking, non-vaping employee that it affects them in any way, shape, or form. And we know scientifically and statistically that there's no secondhand smoke here because it's not smoke.
Yeah.
Politicians get it.
It's not smoke.
My biggest issue when I go to the city council meetings is that they're dropping this in with cigarettes and telling me as an employer I can't have vaping in my shop. Well, I tell you, if it comes to my town, I'll move our company out of town. And so put that in your politician's hat and smoke it because this is not smoking.
So right now, you as an employer have the legal right to allow vaping inside your own privately held business?
I do, because we're in San Diego proper. Now, if I was in Encinitas or Cardiff or Del Mar, I would not. I would literally have to not allow my employees to smoke, or, and anyway, yeah, it is the most ridiculous, asinine thing I've ever seen in my life.
All right, so let's see how radical you are. Let's just say you were in Escondido,
right,
and you vehemently disagreed with the decision of city council. Would you still allow your employees to smoke inside your business?
I would personally allow them, but then again, I'd get into this huge expense on legally figuring out what my liability was if some other employee decided they didn't like it. This is all HR stuff, and when you start getting around 50 employees, you address this. I see clearly that the regulations, they're throwing it in with the smoking regulations, which ban smoking in the workplace. And again, this is not smoking. We all know that. So I think that the most important thing around legislation is the legislation be rewritten. I can clearly understand not sitting in a restaurant blowing clouds of steam around the room. Agreed. We all agree with that. But as far as
airplanes.
Yeah, or airplanes, same thing.
Yeah.
And I fly 200 days a year, and I tell you, I vape on the plane and have never had a complaint about it.
That's interesting. I was reading a statistical survey a few months ago, and the average population, quote unquote, the average population doesn't have an issue. The larger the environment, the higher the percentage. Like, you want to vape inside a baseball stadium? No worries. Basketball stadium? No worries. Concert? Absolutely no worries. It seems like as the space got smaller and smaller, that's when people maybe had more of an issue with it. So by the time you drilled it down to a restaurant, and let's face it, whether you're smoking a cigarette or whether you're smoking vapor, you still don't want to be disruptive or distracting. It's just plain inconsiderate. In an airplane, it's questionable. It's a very contained environment, and but everything in between, the average person, whether they smoke or whether they don't smoke or vape or don't vape, they really don't give a crap. I mean, the truth is that, a lot of the things that really irk me about this industry and why I'm so adamant about fighting the good fight is it's really about freedom of choice. I mean, if you are not hurting other people, if you are not damaging the environment, it's like, let's get real here, folks, right?
I totally agree. And when I'm on an airplane, I have to tell you, I'm extremely discreet. So I'm not hitting my pen. I think, blowing it down between the seats. I always get a window seat, and a lot of times I'll just go into the bathroom and hit the vape for a while. Which, of course, if it had any ill effects, that alarm would go off in about 3 seconds flat.
So let me ask you, have you ever had other employers of large employee bases ask you about, or have you had conversations with them about encouraging them to get their employees to smoke? And before you answer that question, a friend of mine who has a manufacturing company here in Los Angeles, for Christmas, instead of getting quote-unquote traditional gifts, he bought them all starter kits.
There you go.
And so I thought, Paul, that's a great thing to do because two reasons. One is it shows that you care. And two, it helps certainly the employee. And three, it's going to make a more productive employee. So this is a win-win-win all the way around.
Yeah, I totally get it. And one of in part of our format or our business format here is to do that. And that's, I'm a professional speaker by trade in the marketing world, and I invite any business who wants us to come in and just talk to them, just educate them about what it is, and then maybe introduce the product and dispel some of the myths that are out there that are being perpetuated by the legislation and politicians, to invite us into their business organizations to show them the effects. And I can't imagine, there's like Qualcomm in our particular neck of the woods, and they have 6,000 employees. 20% of those, that's a huge number.
Huge number.
And what it's doing to their medical expense is astronomical.
All right, so let's talk about that. We have just a few minutes. So, strictly where the rubber meets the road from a monetary standpoint, have you seen a decrease in your employee costs since your employees have gone to vaping as opposed to cigarettes?
We have a massive decrease in expense, a massive decrease in absentee or illness, which I don't know if that's directly related, but it's just
probably.
Yeah, probably.
What about insurance costs? Because normally insurance companies, from what I've seen, they want to see you off of cigarettes for 1 year.
So they want to see you off of cigarettes for 1 year, and so that's a truth and tell kind of thing. That's dating us as well.
Yes.
Yeah, exactly. But the truth of the matter is that if you're vaping, and we understand that if you get tested right now and you're not smoking, and they don't ask the question, "Are you vaping?" In a medical interview, you're fine. But again, you can just imagine how. I think 40% of our medical insurance, which we provide to our employees long before Obama ever came around, is a direct result of the 8 people we had that smoked.
All right, so let's talk about that. So assuming that you basically have a vaping-only employee population compared to what you had before with 20% that were smokers, what would you guess would be the drop in your overall insurance rates? Would it be like just a couple of %, or would it be something more significant?
I think it's going to be a lot more significant, and I'm working very closely with our insurance carrier. And so we're going to revisit it after we've had the vaping or these employees not smoking for a year. And we see anywhere from a 20 to as much as a 40% difference in actual insurance costs.
Wow.
So massive.
This has been great, David. So if anyone wants to get a hold of you, again, David Collins with California Vaping Company. And again, they are vaping, they are juice wholesalers. So, for those of you who want to get a hold of David, what's the best way to get a hold of you or your sales team?
The best way to get a hold of me is really my cell phone. And I'm an old-fashioned guy. I always say pick up the damn phone.
You actually text too, you old-timer?
Yeah, I do.
Good for you.
Not when I'm driving, though, because I'm old and I need my glasses. But anyway, the number is 858-254-9619, or you can email Chris at chris@calivapeco.com.
Is that Cali, C-A-L-I?
Correct.
All right, so CaliVapeco.com. So again, for those of you who are maybe interested or are private labeling, are looking for a FDA approved lab to be your juice manufacturer, check these guys out and give them a call. So again, we're coming to the end of Section 2, and this section has been sponsored by Vapers.com. They are the up-and-coming source for all of your hardware and mod needs. Visit their website, which will be going live, finally in June. That's Vapers.com. What an awesome name for a website. Is that right, David?
I like it. They did well there. I probably researched that one.
Vapers.com. They paid big dollars for that. Yeah. All right. So anyway, we're going to go ahead and wind down Section 2, but do not go away. We are going to come back with an interview with Ron Tully with Safada. And if Safada sounds familiar, you will have recognized that because last week we interviewed Cynthia Cabrera, who is the executive director. I'll be back in just a moment to tell you why we're talking to Ron Tully. Do not go away. You're listening to Vape News Radio, the voice of vaping.